you can break free of this cycle at any time. And you can stave off that last symptom before you're like ready to leave or you leave a burnout. Hey, friend, welcome back to the Art of Managing Your Brain podcast. I'm Dr. Charlie Hornes. Today, we are tackling one of the most critical topics for high-achieving women navigating the chaos of life and work. It's the breaking point. Now, this is something that I have always called the threshold in my research. And a couple episodes ago, I went over my framework, and this is one of the biggest ones. So what does this look like? It looks like if you've ever thought, I'm strong, I can handle this, only to suddenly feel like everything around you is falling apart. Your focus is gone. Your emotions are all over the place. Your memory is failing you. Your remembering of events, your inability to regulate your emotions, your emotional life feels like it's out of your own control. You're not alone. You're not weak. And there's nothing, quotes, I'm doing quotes, there's nothing wrong with you. What's happening is a biological and neurological reality that I call the threshold transgression. So in this episode, what we're going to do is uncover what actually happens to your brain and your body when stress pushes you beyond healthy limits. The sneaky ways chronic stress rewires your mind, leaving you in a cycle of exhaustion and self-doubt. And most importantly, how to recognize the early warning signs and step back before you hit that breaking point. So by the end of this episode, you'll have a roadmap for stopping the cycle of burnout in its tracks and reclaiming control over your life. So if you're ready to get started, then let's go. I'm Dr. Charlie Hornes, highly anxious people pleaser turned master certified professional life coach. Learning to manage my brain was so life-changing for me that I got certified so that I could teach these incredible evidence-based practices to you. Are you ready for massive change? Let's go. All right. So before we dive in, I have a quick favor to ask. If you're finding value in this podcast, would you take 60 seconds to share it with someone who needs to hear it? Your share could be a lifeline they didn't even know they needed. And if you're ready to uncover some mental patterns that have been holding you back, I invite you to take my Thought Saboteur quiz at charliehornescoaching.com/quiz. It's a quick eye-opening tool that helps you pinpoint what's really keeping you stuck and how to move forward. All right, now let's talk about stress, thresholds, and the hidden dangers of believing we can handle it all. All right. I always want to start in my favorite place, the science. So what happens physically and mentally when you hit your breaking point? Your brain and your body are designed to handle short bursts of stress. Now, we've talked about this very generally, but I want to break it down and unpack it a little bit further today. So this is called acute stress, and it activates your survival instincts. Your survival instincts become aroused based on what is happening around you. It is determining as a threat. So your survival mechanisms and your amygdala fires up. It comes online. And then that neuromodulator, that stress chemical, stress hormone, cortisol, it floods your system. And that's when you're ready to fight, flee, or freeze. And we always have that lovely fourth one, fawn. I think that's more of an evolved stress response because I'm not really sure you can people please a lion, but there are people in our offices that often feel like we're dealing with lions. So yeah, this is all normal. That's the most important thing. If you take anything away from anything I've ever said, is that there's nothing wrong with you. Most all of this is entirely normal. But when stress becomes chronic, when there's no pause, no break, no season, right? We can all work our tails off doing stuff we love in high stress, pressure situations when we're full of purpose and we love what we do, even when we're mucking through the crap, right? Because we love what we do. But when we're in full-time, acute chronic stress, that is not good for us. We get no break. It's not a season and we do not like it. There's no time to recover. And it pushes our brain into this place that I call the threshold transgression. This is the moment when your stress load exceeds your capacity to manage it. This is the problem. You don't know where your level of handling capacity is until you transgress it. Because then it becomes a vice that smashes you. And by then, it is too late. This is not something you can learn prior to. You don't know how much stress you can handle until you pop. I don't see any other way around that. This is the moment when your stress load exceeds your capacity to manage it, to tolerate it. So here's what happens next. When you transgress the threshold, your brain changes. Your brain literally, physically changes. Chronic cortisol flooding your system, flooding your brain, shrinks your hippocampus. That's the part of your brain that's responsible for memory. Now, again, your brain is an entire system. It is entirely intricately woven together. There's no real bits and pieces separated. It all works as a functioning organ. But there are pieces of your brain, our neurologists out there that are studying this, the real doctors. I always have to tell you, I'm not a neuroscientist. My research is in the neurobehavioral sciences around the specific things that I talk about around women and high pressure stress, especially in working environments. That's what my dissertation was on. But I do know some stuff, and what I do know that's helpful, I'm here to share with you. And if ever you have anything to add, please drop it in the DMs because I'm a lifelong learner and I want to know everything about the brain. When cortisol floods your brain, it shrinks the dendrites in your gray matter in the hippocampus. And that's responsible for your memory. And this is what overloads your prefrontal cortex. That's responsible for your decision making. That's your thinking brain. This is why you start forgetting things, making mistakes, or feeling brain fog. This is when you emotionally spiral, because without a functioning prefrontal cortex to regulate your emotions, you are more prone to emotional outbursts, shutdowns, or feelings of despair. You are more prone to feeling like you are not in control of your own emotional life. All of this has to do with how your brain begins to function under acute chronic stress when it's flooded with these neuromodulators, these stress hormones that you're not supposed to live in and day out. And when you're working in what you believe to be a toxic, hostile, or dysfunctional working environment, your cortisol levels are probably too high for too long, which causes brain damage. The next thing that happens is your body begins to signal an alarm. You're going to have symptomatology, physical, mental, exhaustion. Some of these symptoms are significant headaches, big deal digestive issues, real bone tired exhaustion. You just don't feel okay. What this is your body screaming at you for relief. The chemicals are not proportionate to where they should be in your brain and your body. It's physically causing you damage. This isn't about willpower. This is your brain physically becoming rewired under chronic stress. You're not falling apart because you're weak. You're not forgetting stuff because maybe you're wrong or you misremembered it. Often when you're in high stress, sometimes conflictual, hostile, or you're feeling you're under attack, whether or not you are, opinion is not important. This is about how your brain is processing what you're experiencing. So whatever you're feeling is real to you and to your body, and your body's responding to it. And those are real stress hormones coursing through your body. You know, imagined or real, it's still a thing and it's still causing you physical damage. So you have to understand you're not falling apart. You're not weak. You're not strong enough. This is your biology and it's crying for help. Look, I know how easy it is to think I should be stronger than this. Why is this affecting me so hard? Why can't I get it together? Why can't I control my emotional life? But let me say this loud and clear to you. Resilience is not about endurance. Resilience is not about putting up with. Pushing through isn't a badge of honor. It is a fast track to that final symptom I talk about, that is burnout. And burnout is the final step before you leave. Often, if you're dealing in my framework, those 5 pieces that come together as a perfect storm, I have an episode about it. Burnout will happen around 18 months and then you will leave. So how do you recognize this breaking point? The problem with this threshold transgression is that it creeps up on you. You don't wake up one day and suddenly hit your breaking point. You don't wake up and say, I feel like tomorrow I'm going to hit my threshold. I'm going to transgress it. And so let me, do a whole bunch of stuff in 24 hours to solve the problem. This is not something you can procrastinate. It's a slow build. So here are 3 common signs that you're crossing into and falling over the threshold. The first one is cognitive dissonance. So what is this? Cognitive dissonance is the feeling of being torn between what you think you should do and what your body and your mind are screaming for. This is the feeling of being torn between what what you're 99% certain is true, fact, and reality, and what other people are seemingly telling you is false. This is when you cannot reconcile these things. So it's, for example, a symptom of significant gaslighting. And I have a whole episode coming up about that because a lot of you don't know what gaslighting really is. We're going to get into that. But when you feel your reality doesn't match, your insides don't match your outsides, what you think you should be doing and what your body is screaming at you for, that's this in-between space of cognitive dissonance, that things don't match and your brain kind of, comes to a halt abruptly. It shows up as indecision, procrastination, and constantly second guessing yourself, constantly asking yourself if this is about you. Are you getting this wrong? Do people know something you don't? That kind of thing. The next symptom would be emotional dysregulation, like we talked about. Think about how you are responding to people. Are you snapping at them for no reason? Are you crying over what you would think are small things, whether they are or not? Maybe you feel like this is not cry worthy. Are you feeling like your reactions emotionally are not in proportion to the situation? And has this been building over time? Did you at one time feel in control of your emotional life? And through this sort of being steeped in a high stress, chronic acute stress environment, you begin to slowly feel like you're losing control of your own emotional life. If that's the case, these are signs that your brain is literally stuck in survival mode and you are unable to regulate your emotions. That is a byproduct. And again, it's biology. These things are happening because of reasons, not because something's wrong with you. They are results of being steeped in high chronic acute stress, and they have physiological repercussions in your body. And then you have these, like I said, the physiological symptoms. So you have real physical symptoms that will also happen. So first you have the changing of your brain. Then you have the emotional dysregulation, and then you also have physical symptoms. So this chronic acute stress often manifests physically, like unexplained fatigue or insomnia. They can be opposite things, even illnesses you can't seem to shake. Significantly digestive issues, the GI stuff that is really often related to stress. There's a lot of new research coming out about particularly autoimmune disorders that mess up what you can eat, that manifest in your skin, that manifest in your GI system. There's a lot of stress-related illness. And a lot of the research is also pointing to much of what is killing people can be traced back to stress. Your body, it may feel like it's betraying you. It's likely a sign that the stress is starting to hit critical levels when you start to just sort of manifest things that weren't there before. Now, that's one of the key things that I have to highlight in my work. These things manifest within a system. There is a system at play, a perfect storm, if you will. That's why I have that sort of like aerial view thing, get in the plane with me, because we get up above that storm system and we can see the system below us swirling around for what it is. And we can think clearly. We can react in more proportionate ways. And then we begin to respond rather than react. And once we understand so much of this is really about our biology, we can start to identify that there's nothing wrong with us. We're just in a perfect storm of acute chronic stress. Our survival mechanisms are activated for way too long. And the cascading neurotransmitters that are coursing through our brains and our bodies are wreaking havoc. So it's very important to begin to see that this isn't about you, as in something's wrong with you. You know, I tell people I coach all the time, I'm sorry, but you're just not that special, that all this stuff is wrong with you and you alone. This is everybody's story. It's just a matter of at what level is your threshold transgressed. And you don't know where that is until it happens. So we're all different. We're made up of a billion different pieces that create where this threshold is. But your body is telling you when you're starting to creep close to it. You're having mental health symptomology you didn't have beforehand, or that you have no idea of a history of or a genetic disposition to. It kind of comes out of nowhere, seemingly. Same thing with the physical stuff. You have no history. And that doesn't mean stuff isn't going to happen. Of course it is. And again, I'm not a medical doctor. Go talk to your doctor. Go talk to your family about your genetic history. But what I'm trying to say is often these things manifest in ways you've never experienced before and you don't have a history of. You're not disposed to. Let's do a quick reflection to, get some of our brain working on some of this. I want you to think back through this past week. And if this week doesn't work, then, think further back. But let's start with this week. Did you have a moment where you felt like you were barely holding it together? You felt like you were losing it? We all describe it differently. however you want to describe that, you know what the feeling is. And then I want you to think about what was the actual trigger that caused the feeling. Now, these neurochemicals, the neuromodulators, stay in our system after an event for at least an hour. So you may, an hour after something happens that causes you to activate this survival response, you may react to something different that happens because you still have all of these modulators going through your body, and you may have to trace back what activated it, what triggered it. So what was the event or the thought about the event that triggered it? And then how did it make you feel mentally, emotionally, and physically? So we handle the brain, the heart, and the body. Those are the three pieces of the physiology of what's happening. So this exercise, it's not about judging yourself or others. It's about creating an awareness. And here's why this is important. I know you hear about, being aware is so important. Awareness is the key. Why is awareness the key? Awareness is intentional. Awareness kickstarts your thinking brain so that you can begin coding memories again. You can be aware of your surroundings. You can be prepared for when Mr. Jerkface or Mrs. Jerkface walks into your office or your volunteer space and starts doing their thing. You don't have to be surprised by that because you should expect it because your thinking brain's in charge, not your survival mechanism that wants you to freeze, fawn, run, or fight. And those are just biological instincts. So much of what we do in our survival instincts, you can see are mirrored by animals. A lot of the time, you can find the behavior in monkeys. It's bizarre and interesting. So much of our daily routine is us on autopilot, just trying to get through the day alive. So we're in the storm and we're getting beat up by it rather than getting up and looking down from that aerial view and absolutely having entire control of our emotional life, of our physical life as best we can, and our mental life. And we can keep all of that healthy regardless of the storm whipping around below us rather than at us. Awareness is what creates this. Awareness is building evidence for your brain that these things are really happening. What you're feeling is true, and you can respond rather than react intentionally. You're just going to have to take time, and you're going to have to practice, and you're going to have to put lots of evidence in that evidence folder that tells you you can do this successfully, but you cannot fix what you don't name. That's why awareness is so powerful. And it's often the first thing we have to become intentional about before any change will follow. We think that we create change through changing behavior, but that doesn't stick. And, we have New Year's coming up, and how many of us are going to make these resolutions? And we just say, that's it. I'm changing. I'm doing this. I'm doing that. I got this expensive gym membership, all these lovely, expensive, fabulous gym clothes. And 6 months, 3 months later, it's not happening because we didn't make anything different in our thought pattern. We didn't identify what the problems are, what the barriers are. So you can't fix anything that you cannot name. I've got a place now where I can put everybody's resources in one storefront. What's really cool is when you use the what we call affiliate links, and I'm now becoming an affiliate for a whole bunch of different things. It's all on my website at charliehornesscoaching.com, and it's on the bonus resources page. What happens is when you purchase something off of that, a portion of it goes back to the show. And so what you're doing basically when you buy from there is you're supporting the show at no additional cost to you, which is kind of like the coolest thing ever.
It's going to help us continue to create content for you and bring on incredible guests that are, they blow my mind. So I'm hoping they will blow your mind too, whether it's metaphysics and psychology and theology or high fantasy romance. You're going to find your next favorite read right there. Let's go.
All right. I want to talk about how we break the cycle. So here's some good news. You don't have to stay stuck in this tunnel that is plummeting you towards transgressing your threshold. You don't have to stay stuck there. And if you have transgressed your threshold, which I have done, guilty. I've been there, done that. There are steps that you can take to pull yourself back and build a buffer against future stress or rewire your brain back to a relative semblance of normalcy. Now, there's some stuff that, potentially has been changed. I feel that in myself. After being in a extremely, seemingly toxic, hostile, dysfunctional field, the majority of the time I didn't know any of this thought work. So I was basically on autopilot, reacting. There's differences. I'll never be that person again. I know I'm better for it, but there are some things I know are different and may always be different. And that's okay. Makes me who I am. I also probably wouldn't be hosting a podcast if I hadn't been through this because I used to be terrified and now not so much. So we can pull ourselves back and we can build buffers against the future stress. So a very simple thing you can do is what I like to call a pause plan. And what this is just a simple strategy for stepping back before you hit a breaking. So here's how it would work. You identify an activity or responsibility you can temporarily pause or you can delegate. That's the first step. So step one, identify an activity or responsibility that you can temporarily pause or delegate. Then you set a boundary and say no to one thing this week. And if you want to work on that, see last week's episode. We talk about how to do some of that. The third step is use that time to do something restorative for yourself, whether that is a 15-minute walk, a 15-minute cat nap, or simply sitting in silence. For me, I love to steal opportunity to read a chapter out of one of my lovely high fantasy romance paranormal books. As you know, I'm obsessed with those. I have a great list on my Amazon storefront. Hello, go check that out. You need to do something restorative with that time. Then you need to reframe the beliefs about your resilience. You have to start telling yourself, resilience is not how much I can endure. Because that is exactly the same as the threshold transgression. How do you know how much you can endure until you can no longer endure it? It's a catch-22 you don't want to get stuck in. That's the problem. We don't know when we're going to transgress the threshold until the threshold is transgressed. Resilience isn't about how much you can endure. It's about how quickly you can recover and recover in a way where you feel good. And I don't mean happy or joyful or this, that, and the other. We're not supposed to live. Life is 50-50. We're not going to be happy all the time. That's fine. It's okay. But you have to recover back to a place where you don't feel like neurotransmitters are running the show and you can feel just sort of content and neutral. So this shift helps us focus on restoration instead of endurance. And as science tells us, we learn when we sleep. And if you are not creating restorative time, including good sleep, good health, good eating, good exercise, all those things, then you are not creating the space that you need to recover. So this is not about endurance. This is about focusing on restoration. Now, you can also build yourself a little stress relief toolkit. This could be kind of cliche if you want it to be, or it could be really cool, depending on what you want. But, think about 3 small things that you can do daily to reduce your stress. These are different for everybody. Some people like to do deep breathing. I'm not really into the whole breathing thing, except when I'm trying to go to sleep. Oh my gosh, there's something that I do that just like totally makes me pass out when I can't sleep. It's great. But during the day, I'm not really a big deep breather, but it's so good for you. It sounds like really, new age or whatever. It just gives your brain more oxygen. And when you're in fight or flight, your brain lacks oxygen as far as the ability to think, because all of the blood and oxygen from your thinking mechanism has left and it is raced to your survival mechanism and it's raced to your muscles. And there is work out there that talks about everything in your body shutting down when your brain believes you are under attack. Your reproductive system immediately, your digestion immediately, anything that is like in the process of doing something stops, because your brain says, I don't need to digest that if I'm about to get eaten by, the saber-toothed tiger. That doesn't matter. I don't need to worry about future generations if I'm not going to survive this attack. All that stuff shuts down and everything goes to your muscles and your survival brain instincts so that you can navigate to safety. That's it. You don't have blood or oxygen in your thinking brain when you're under acute chronic stress. That's why you can't think of a good comeback. That's why you're not coding memories well. You can't, remember exactly what, person who seemingly made you feel like you were under attack said, and you can't repeat it verbatim. And then, you look like you can't be trusted because you don't seem to be able to have your facts straight because you didn't code them, because there was no blood or oxygen in your prefrontal cortex where all of those things happen. So maybe deep breathing is a good thing to put on your kit. Go ahead and write down deep breathing as your first one. We'll work on some technique for that. I know lots of people that can help. Maybe before a meeting or an event that feels high stress, you drink a big glass of water. You would be surprised at the difference drinking a big glass of water will do for you physically, mentally, and emotionally. Give it a try. See what happens midday. How many of us do that? We're so busy. Try it. Something else that's really good is getting up, standing up, stretching after about every hour of work. My understanding is that our brain works in about 90-minute cycles, an hour to 90 minutes. It's kind of like, it gets kickstarted and then it works really hard and then it kind of decreases. And then you have to take a bit of a break. And then you start that whole thing again. And that is what a lot of really productive people, that's how they work. About 90 minutes in, maybe an hour, you need to get up, walk around, you stretch. And what that does is help reset your brain, puts you in a more calm and focused state of mind. Also, if you find yourself in what feels like an acute chronic stress environment, getting up, moving your body, walking around. Now, that's an easy thing to remember. I want you to come up with your own little toolkit, right? Come up with maybe 3 to 5 things that ultimately they're going to have some sort of, physio, neuro, behavioral benefit because of how it impacts your brain and your body. But it also is going to make you feel better. So even without all the science-backed, evidence-based practices you can put in this toolkit, just thinking about what's going to make you feel better in the moment is going to be very useful. So come up with some of those things. And these are just small little habits that are going to create that space for your brain to reset and making it so much easier to feel calmer and more focused. All right. I have a couple other little strategies for you because this is a very important thing that I teach about this threshold transgression. Because it's so significant and because it's really ultimately I believe, the number one thing taking women out of their fields. And we all get there in different ways, but ultimately, once we get kicked over that threshold and we fall into the cognitive dissonance, it's a lot of work to get back. Another strategy that I have for my coaching students is what I call the little stress thermometer. Just a simple thing. You just rate your stress daily. If you need to do it hourly, if you're having a rough day, you can even, draw a little thermometer and like color the red up and down. Sometimes, again, what is that going to do if you're coloring and, doing something active on your desk while you're feeling stressed? Take your mind off of the things you're stressing about, put some more oxygen and blood into your brain and kickstart that prefrontal cortex, because you're now activating your body physically in different ways than like thinking about running out the door. Probably not an option with HR, right? So think of the thermometer, use it daily, use it hourly, however you can, and just rate. Now just do a 1 to 10, 1 being calm, 10 being overwhelmed, or vice versa, however you are comfortable with that. You would identify your stress tipping point also, at which you start feeling the symptoms of overwhelm, also the forgetfulness and the irritability. So all of that would go into the stress thermometer. At what level would you say your symptoms are of overwhelm, of forgetfulness, of irritability, of brain fog, and any other symptom you may be identifying? And it may be physical. Are you having a significant headache or stomach ache after, an event happened that caused you a lot of stress? We need to set a plan to take a step back and recalibrate. So often we can't do it in the moment until we have done this building evidence piece where we have convinced our brains, and it happens organically by practice and filling up that evidence file of all the things that you have achieved and the world hasn't ended, right? It doesn't happen in the moment until we get to that place of true results of thought work, that aerial view. And my coach, Brooke, she calls it becoming a watcher of yourself. Gosh, the first time this happened to me, it was so cool. Wow. You literally become a watcher in the moment of yourself and the person you're engaging with. That's what I'm talking about when I say, get in the plane and let's get up there and let's identify that aerial view. We get out of the storm and we see it for what it is. And that is when we start the small steps of taking that step back and recalibrating. And we end up in the big place of the aerial view or the watcher. And it's so cool. So what are these things you can do? You need to create that plan so that you can step back and recalibrate, go back to the delegating or canceling non-essential commitments, practicing setting those boundaries of saying, no, I don't have the capacity for that. You've got to set a plan so that you have that space to recalibrate your brain, your body, and your emotions. Are you starting to really stress at 6? Well, that's why you need this plan or this toolkit so that when you start creeping up to that, you can implement your plan. This is all so that you can work on the awareness factor so that you can start changing the way you think and rewiring what you're doing. So these are little practices, but over time, this preemptive awareness does that rewiring of our brains, and it helps us to begin to recognize and respond before this level of burnout, mirrored symptomatology begins to rear its ugly head for real. You can also do something I call micro commitments. So the first step would be identify one area where you feel overwhelmed because you've taken on too much. Work deadlines, family obligations, too many little events that have built up into a crazy week. Your second step would be reduce the commitments by 10%. So delegate a task, extend a deadline, or say no to a request. You can also see about canceling something that won't have any kind of, detrimental consequences, so that you can prioritize and be 10% less obligated. Then you need to reframe your thoughts. This is the work that's going to retrain your brain to see letting go as a win, not a loss. It's a win. It's a win to feel better. Write down one thing that you're going to add to your pause plan this week. What are the things you're going to cut back on? What are the things that you're going to implement? So one feels bad, cut back. One feels better, do that. That's what we're going to do this week, okay? It can be as simple as saying no to one unnecessary task or carving out those 10, 15 minutes for yourself. But the key is to start small and build momentum. All right. Finally, let's talk about the mental health side of this type of recovery if we are on the other side of this threshold transgression. So when you've been stuck in this chronic acute stress, your thoughts can pretty much inevitably turn against you. Your thoughts can become, I'm failing. Everyone else can handle this. Why can't I? If I stop, everything will fall apart. And again, we're not that special that we're so, things are so wrong with us that it's just us and nobody else. It's just that your brain makes you feel that way. Understanding all of these thoughts that you're having once your brain is turning on you, which, it can do multiple times a day. We have 60,000 thoughts a day or something, and half of them are probably awful, if not more. I would probably say 90% of them are terrible and about us and how awful we are. Your brain makes them up, and they're stress responses. So you need to reframe them. Here's some ideas to reframe these types of thoughts. Instead of I'm failing, we can try, this is my body's way of telling me I need to rest. Rest isn't failure. It's a strategy for success. Instead of saying, if I stop, everything will fall apart. Why don't we try, if I stop, I'll come back stronger and more effective, more efficient. Maybe I will have learned something. We have to have a positive spin on this stuff. We have to. Every time you reframe a stress-based thought, you are engaging that neuroplasticity. You're rewiring your brain to focus on solutions instead of the overwhelm. Okay, my friends. So let me end by sharing the importance of understanding this idea of the threshold transgression, because it is real. And it is a dangerous, slow building, slow burn, slow rolling, slow creeping trap. It's also preventable by recognizing the signs, that awareness, by creating your pause plan, by having your toolkit. Stop this, do that. Very simple. And also learning to reframe your beliefs about resilience. Again, steeped in socialized patriarchy, social expectations, gender norms, all of these things. And none of them are real, and they are all made up and based in nothing. You can reframe all of these beliefs that you have about yourself and that you have about other people and that other people have about you. All three of those are nonsense, based in nothing, not fact, entirely made up. You can reframe these beliefs about resilience, what it means to you, what other people think it means, what other people impose on you, what you think about yourself, what you think about other people and resilience. You can break free of this cycle at any time. And you can stave off that last symptom before you're ready to leave, or you leave a burnout. So this week, I challenge you to take one step, just one, to lighten your load, to alleviate the stress that you're feeling you're under. If you're feeling overwhelmed, choose one small thing and you lighten that load. Maybe you say no. Maybe you pause a task to give you some breathing room. Maybe you give yourself permission to rest. Give that a try and see if you start feeling any better. Let me know. Drop me a DM. So friends, if this episode resonates, would you share it with somebody who needs these tools? And Don't forget to take my free thought saboteur quiz at charliehornetscoaching.com/quiz to uncover those thought patterns that are keeping you stuck. So thanks again for checking out the show, listening to the Art of Managing Your Brain podcast. And I really hope you will share this with someone who might need it. And don't forget to leave us a rate and a review because that helps us, break the algorithm. My friend, remember, resilience isn't about enduring. It's about recovering. It's about recuperating. It's about rest. I know you got this. All right. I'll see you next week.